recording? Do you think it is recording? It is. So we begin with the lecture. My first lecture is going to be about the very early history of relationships between Russia and England. So it is the pre-16th and 16th century. Well, if you look at the map of Europe, this is a 16th century map. It is from the 9th to the 10th centuries. So the first contacts, the first recorded contacts between Russia and England date back to the 11th century. This is a map of Europe in those days. You can see the huge old Russian Empire of Kiev and Novgorod, and all the prince between them. And then there is England, right? Where could Russians and the English sort of contact and meet? Hardly anywhere. Hardly anywhere. There was nothing between us. Then the distances were much too long for those means of transport, those vehicles, to reach each other simply. But actually, if we suggest that there were no ways to reach each other, we would be mistaken, because actually in those days people would travel far and wide and visit each other's countries. But from what we know, the first contact occurred during the 11th century, when the two princes, Edward and Edmund Ethelings, who were sons of King Edmund, they were reported to flee, to run away to Rus, to Kiev, to Yaroslav the Wise, because at home there was a huge, again, another Danish invasion, and they were the sons of the English king, so they fled England. They ran away from England, and they came to Yaroslav the Wise. Why? Because Yaroslav's wife was Irene, or Anne, but she was also a Swedish princess whose name was Ingigerda. And therefore, she was very distantly related to the Vikings. Well, she was, of course, related to the Vikings, but she was distantly related to the people who ruled in England at that time as well. So they knew where they were fleeing. They went away, and they were quite young. There is a picture of Edward the Exile, who was the heir to the English throne. So he spent quite a lot of time at the court of Yaroslav the Wise, who sustained them for some time. And then when he became older, he went back to England because he wanted to capture back the throne of the English kingdom. He went there, and he actually almost got the crown, but he was apparently poisoned, so he just died. He fell ill and died several days or weeks later. So he was not a very lucky king, but he was the first one who, the first of the dynastic contacts between Russia and England. The next point of contact is of the Norman VI, when William the Conqueror conquered England, and he killed the last Anglo-Saxon king, Harold. His daughter, Geitha of Wessex, again fled to Denmark. She ran away to Denmark. And the Danish king, so she fled to Denmark. Why? Because it was sort of, it was also related to the Vikings. All of them were related to the Vikings in those days. And she wanted, well, she had to find some place to be saved from the invasion. And the Danish king, he had to take care of her. And of course, the surest way to take care of somebody was to provide them with a good family. So he provided her with a good family, and he found a good bridegroom, a good husband for her in the land of the Russians. And so the chronicler says, and he gave the daughter in marriage to the king of the Ruthenians, Ruthenorum in Latin, Valdemarus. He, Harold, obtained from the daughter a grandson, who after the man of our time became his successor, both by lineage and by name. Thus the British and the Eastern blood being united in our prince, caused the common offspring to be an adornment to both peoples. And that future husband was Vladimir Monomach, who was called Valdemarus in the chronicles. No, he married her. He was a bridegroom. He became a bride. Her husband. He married her, and Harold, his dead father-in-law, the Anglo-Saxon king, got a grandson. So the son of Vladimir Monomach became the grandson of Harold, the last Anglo-Saxon king. And moreover, which is what is more interesting, his name was Mstislav in Russian, but he got a double name, Mstislav Harold. His second name was to honor his famous grandfather, or rather his unhappy grandfather. And this prince, Mstislav Harold, he was quite active in Russian history. One of the things that are connected with his name is the Gospel of Mstislav, or the Mstislav Gospel, Mstislav Evangelium. This is a beautiful illuminated book, which was commissioned by Mstislav Harold. It was handwritten for him with beautiful illuminations, illustrations, and it is preserved in one of Russian museums. But what is more interesting, he himself married another Swedish princess again. So he married a Swedish princess. Her name in Russia was Euphrosyne. And then, because there were a lot of dynastic marriages, interdynastic marriages, after several generations in the 14th century, he became the forefather of Edward III Plantagenet. So all the kings of that dynasty, starting with Edward III Plantagenet, were successors of the Russian prince Mstislav Harold. So see, there's this intersections between the fates of different of Russian and English courts. After this, we hardly ever hear anything about the connections between England and Russia. In the famous story Canterbury Tales by Chaucer, there's one line that a knight, who is the hero of one of the small stories in those tales, he traveled to Rus, and so he also fought the wars with Livonians, but he didn't fight the war with the Russians. He just participated in those local wars, Lithuania and Rus. But after this, we know hardly anything. The active contacts actually begin only in the 16th century. So this is the place and the date when the contacts between the two countries begin. It is 1553, and this is the reign of Tsar Ivan Grozniy, or Ivan the Terrible. Yeah. What happens in the second half of in the middle of the 16th century? The English, like other Western European nations, were active in finding new ways to the New World, in the exploration. They were keen to find new ways to India, because India was seemed to be the treasure house of the world. They were also quite interested to find new ways to China. And of course, they tried to find the naval ways to China and to India, because they were great seafarers by those days. And but why were they doing all of this? Have you ever thought? They wanted to not just to explore. No, not even conquering. They were, at some points, they were just private initiatives. They were tradespeople. They wanted to earn more money. They wanted to find new routes and new markets for the English goods, but they were also looking for new ways, new routes to buy exotic things and to bring them to Britain, to bring to Britain things that did not exist in Britain. So there was a company of tradesmen in England who decided to find new routes to China and to India. So in 1553, 1552, they launched a new enterprise. They put together some money, they bought some ships, and they started to sail around Norway because they thought that maybe they could find a way to India here in the north. So but of course, these are really inhospitable, harsh territories. It's not so easy to survive here. So their ships were caught in ice. First of all, they lost each other. And two of those ships, they tried to winter on one of the islands, but they did not survive. So they perished in the White Sea. Whereas one of them was lucky, and he found his way into the mouth of the Dvina River. And this is where Arkhangelsk is now. There was no Arkhangelsk at the time. There was Kolmogra, and the monastery of St. Nicholas. So his name, the name of this lucky captain was Richard Chancellor. Richard Chancellor. And he's going to be a big name in the relationships between Russia and England. He's actually the first English merchant, you know the word merchant, right? Who launched this very profitable mutual enterprise between Russia and England. So he came here in 1553 in August. And when he came here, the name of his ship was Edward Bonaventure. The local people informed the Tsar about these new foreigners, and he was given the right to travel to Moscow. And of course, he was quite surprised that he would miles to get to the capital. Actually, there is this memorial plaque in Arkhangelsk. Ричарду Chancellor, капитана Эдуарда Бонавентуры, Лондон, с чьим приходом сюда в 1953 году начались регулярные отношения России с Англией. So he came to Moscow. He was received by Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Grozniy, and he also gave him, well, he didn't have a lot with him on the ship, but he, of course, he had some sort of precious things. So he gave to him a chalice, a cup, which was, it was beautiful, made of silver, and the English were famous for being silversmiths. We don't know whether this was actually the chalice, but it is one of the earliest gifts from England, which is now stored in the armory, in the armory. And presumably this might be the original cup given by Chancellor to Ivan the Terrible. Then Ivan the Terrible was really glad. Do you know why? Do you know why? Let me show you the map again. In those days, Russia was deliberately cut off from Western Europe by Poland and Sweden. They did not want Russia to trade with Germany, France, and they were, of course, Poland. Poland was quite strong at the time, and it also aspired to get the lands that Russia now owns. And so there was a lot of, there was a lot of war between Poland and Russia, and well, the Livonians, the German military orders, crusaders, who were stationed here. So there was a lot of war, and it wasn't easy for Russians to trade with Western Europe because all of this were quite hostile lands. So this was a new outing. This was a new opportunity right? Because this is a new route discovered by the English, and he was quite eager to start these relationships, to form new alliances. So he was very, very hospitable, welcoming to Richard Chancellor, and we'll read about that. But first, let's read about Chancellor's impressions, because when he came back to England, he was very excited. He wrote a book which was called The Book of the Great and Mighty Emperor of Russia. The Book of the Great and Mighty Emperor of Russia. And in his book, this is one of those rare books written by the English, which tells about Russia in a very positive way. Very positive way. Well, he had to tell his friends, the company, and the king, of course, about his success. He wanted to show how successful he was, what a good merchant he was. And so this is what he wrote. Let me read it in English, and then we'll try to translate it into Russian. Russia is very plentiful, both of land and people, and also wealthy for such commodities as they have. In those days, you was used both for we and for you, right? Let us translate. Russia is very plentiful, both of land and people. Богатой землей и людьми, and also wealthy for such commodities as they have. И богата commodities, товарами, которые у них есть. They be very great fishers for salmons and small cods. И трески. They have also a great trade in seething of salt water. Seething of salt water. Выпаривание. У них также хорошо развито ремесло, trade not as торговля, but trade as ремесло. Ремесло выпаривание соляной воды, so getting salt. And of course, salt was very important. To the north part of that country are the places where they have their furs, as sables, martens, grise, beavers, foxes, white, black, and red, minks, ermines, miniver, and harts. What is he praising now? Yeah, the animals who are fur-producing animals, right? And he enumerates many of them, who are beavers, бобры, sables, соболя, martens, куницы, foxes, white, black, and red, right? Different types of foxes. Minks, ermines, как раз тоже соболя, по-моему, нет, горностай, and harts, олень. And this is also important, right? Because this furs mean clothes. There are also a fish's teeth, which fish is called a morse. Также есть кто? Морж. Рыба зовется морж. А чем она важна? Своими клыками. Да, рыбий зуб. Why was this morse, this fish tooth, why was it so important? No, not only for drinking. It's just, remember, this is the time without polymers, without chemical stuff, right? You don't get a lot of plastic. This is just good material for different things, right? You can make a lot of things for the household. This is just good, solid, strong material that can be used for items of luxury, for kitchen utensils, for many other things. The takers thereof dwell in a place called postesora, which bring them upon hearts to lampas to sell. The takers thereof dwell in a place called postesora. Добытчики этого зуба живут в месте, которое называется Пустозеро. There was a place like that. И они их возят на оленях в Лампожию продавать. And from Lampas carry them to a place called Kolmogro, where the here market is holding on St. Nicholas Day. И оттуда возят их Догадайтесь, куда? Холмогром. Холмогоры. Слыхали такое? Холмогоры. Where the here market, and here people who know, who have had the subject of history of English. You can guess what is here. Maybe if you remember Old English pronouns. There. They, right? Their market is held on St. Nicholas Day. Там значит, базар, рынок проводится в день святителя Николая. To the west of Kolmogorod, there is a place called Gratanova. In our language, Novgorod, where much fine flax and hemp grows, and also much wax and honey. К западу от Холмогорья есть место, которое называется Новгород. Правда, очень странно здесь, да, почему Гратанова на нашем языке Новгород. It's strange what is, in English it is called Novgorod. And what is Gratanova is... Yeah. Yeah, this is just an obscure place. Где растет много хорошего flax, льна, лен, and flax is important again for as this is used for different things. It can be used for clothing, can be used for other things like paper. So remember again, there's no chemistry in those days. So different things, different materials are produced of plants. And one more plant is mentioned here, which we're going to speak about. This is hemp. What is hemp? Konoplia. Konoplia. Pinka. Well, we're going to speak about this. But also wax and honey. Vosk и мед. And this is also important because honey is the only known by those days natural source of sugar. Well, soon they're going to discover, well, beetroot, right, and also the sugar from the New World. But honey is the traditional source of anything that is sweet. And of course, wax is also used as a chemical stuff. Now, let's return to hemp. Before I started teaching this course, I had no idea how important hemp was. Yes. Not as a source of drugs. No, people did not consume hemp for drugs. They did not think about that in those days.
How can
Well, we know now we know people do use, yeah, but in those days, no. What they used it for this thing. It is called pinka, или pinka. I never know where the stress is. This is what they made out of hemp, because hemp was first soaked in water. Then it was, pinka, thank you very much. Then it was sort of messed around and they dried it, right? And then they made this sort of tissue thing, or thready things, which could then be used as nowadays, as they use these plastic things for. So you could make all sorts of things. The chief and the most important thing that the English needed it for, and they kept importing it for several centuries until the middle of the 19th century. Why? Because it is what ropes are made from. And the English, of course, needed these ropes for their mighty fleet. All the English fleet until the 19th century sailed under the Russian ropes. And Napoleon, among other things, when he was trying to block England, to organize this embargo for England, he was trying to stop the Russian imports of hemp into England, because it was important for the naval power of England. Let's read some other things. Well, these are from the internet. I think this is just exciting, how important hemp was. So paper for books until the 19th century was made out of hemp. Then you could pay taxes in the United States with hemp. It was growing hemp in the 17th century in the United States was obligatory. So if you did not grow it, you could go to prison. Quite opposite to what is happening nowadays, right? George Washington, Thomas Jefferson grew hemp because that was very important in terms of industry. The word canvas comes from the Old English word canevas, which comes from the Latin word cannabis. 80% of textiles linen, and other textiles were until 1820. Remember, Richard Chancellor, this is 16th century. Until the 19th century, 80% of these things were made out of hemp. All the Bibles, maps, flags were all made of hemp. Then painters painted on canvas, which were all made of hemp. It is also quite important that it doesn't rot easily. Yeah, so at times it was even overestimated. So they thought that everything was going to be made out of hemp, but then the speedy, fast development of chemistry made hemp redundant. Although, by the way, it's not so simple. We'll talk about this in a while. So look, it could also produce hemp petrol, and some hard parts of the car were made out of hemp. So you could just put several layers of that, you dried it, and you got strong things, right? The sort of like plastic things. They were better than metal. Why? In some terms, to some degree. Why? Because the metal is difficult to produce. It's very heavy. It's very expensive. Hemp is easy to produce. It's rather hard. So you could also make armor from hemp, but it's also very light. So lots of good things. And so $1 billion crop. It was the first agricultural crop that reached the circulation of $1 billion. So quite an eye-opener it was for me. I hope it is for you. So it just shows you how important some things were. But now think why this could be important now. What is paper made of nowadays? Trees. And trees are really difficult to grow back, right? They are recycled. They are, what's the good word? The renewable resource. But they are renewed very slowly. Whereas hemp is renewed yearly. So it's not surprising nowadays that we think of, now we see news like this, that hemp could start being grown again.
There is a stereotype that houses in USA or something like that are very breakable. Why didn't they just think of
building a house? I don't think that nobody in history. I don't think that nobody, even in those days, built houses out of hemp. No, it was far too fragile.
But it would have been such a good idea.
Well, maybe, I don't know, but I think that you can use that not for these constructions. The constructions have to be, of course, stronger than that. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So, yeah, and I forget why I put this here, but this is, again, it shows you this interconnection between the trade between countries, and it also shows you how little people in Western Europe know about Russia. The European Union banned the exportation of lavatories to Russia last summer. Russian citizens could be impacted, as only 1 in 5 have indoor plumbing. Can you imagine? I mean, no, this is not true. But this is what the English think.
The English what?
Oh, this is Daily Mail. The Daily Mail. They think we do not have toilets. So when the European Union bans the import of toilets into Russia, they're going to harm Russia. Yeah, all right, let's continue to the pleasant bit again from Richard Chancellor. One more piece that I wanted to read in our lecture, not in the seminar, to get the feel of what he wrote about. The Moscow is from Yaroslav, 200 miles. The country betwixt them is very well replenished with small villages, which are so well filled with people that it is wonder to see them. Let us translate it. В 200 милях от Ярославля, территория между ними is very well replenished with small villages. Деревень, сел, which are so well filled with people that it is wonder to see them. Да, что удивительно видеть столько людей. The ground is well stored with corn. Нет, кукурузы-то не было. Нет, и corn вообще-то это не кукуруза. Это на американском кукуруза, а по-английски corn это зерно. Right. Так много зерна. Да, yeah. No, not wheat. Russians didn't grow wheat much in those days. They grew oats and they also grew rye, rosh, which they carried to the city of Moscow in such abundance that it wanted to see it. И они carry, возят, да, транспортируют это зерно в Москву in such abundance, изобилии, that it is wonder to see thee. Что удивительно видеть. You shall meet in the morning 700 or 800 sleds coming or going thither. You shall meet in the morning.
7 или 8 сотен упряжек.
Саней, да, упряжек, coming and going thither. Оттуда, that carry corn. And some carry fish. And you shall have some that carry corn to the Moscow and some that fetch corn from thence. Некоторые везут в Москву, а некоторые из Москвы. That at the least dwell 1,000 miles off. То есть они везут некоторые из Москвы за 1000 миль, да. And all their carriage is on sleds. На санях. Yeah, but of course he came to Russia in late autumn when there was snow and everything. Yeah, well, he just came to, but he waited there for a month, I think, for the permission to come to Moscow. Right? He actually never got it before he went. And then when he started to Moscow, he got the permission. Right. So now you know where the where the Moscow traffic jams come from. They go from the 16th century. In the morning, 700 or 800 sleds coming, going hither and thither. Nothing has changed. Well, many things repeat. Yeah, these things we're going to read in the seminar. But now let's continue with this. So he went back to England. He started a new journey. He came to Moscow in 1555, again, with more gifts, with more ships. And they also started the first overseas company in England. Well, what they first, you have heard of the Ost Indies and East Indies companies, right? West Indies and East Indies companies. But they came later. The first company for trade overseas was the Muscovy Company. And this is a piece of the Russian Chronicle, which tells us about the reception of Richard Chancellor by Ivan the Terrible, Ivan Grozniy. Who can read this? Let's practice. Who can read this? О посланниках Аглинского Филиппа короля того ж месяца пришли ко царю и великому князю от цесарева Карлосова сына, от Ингельского Филиппа короля и его королевы Марии, посланники Рицард и Юрий. Ricard is Richard. Right. And also it's interesting that in those, well, the first name of England here is Ingilski. Yeah. But then somebody wrote, well, crossed it out. Over that wrote Aglinsky. That shows you how the English pronunciation itself was changing at the time. That was the time of the great vowel shift in England. And when at first Russians heard something like Ingilski, yeah, but for some reason they transcribed it as Ingilski, and then they changed it into Aglitsky, and that stuck. That became the permanent name for England later. So this is the transcription. Рыцарь да Юрий с грамотами, а в грамотах писал к царю великому князю с великою любовную похвалою и царем его благочестивым нарицая на многих государствах, и с челобитием, и с прошением о всяком добре. А привезли 3 грамоты, одна по-фрязски, Who knows what this is? So he brought several charters, several letters. One of them was in no Italian. Italian, because Latin was an international language in those days. Другая по-польски. Why in Polish? Because Poland was better known to the English, and that was the best known Slavic country for the English. And the third one was in Greek, because there were, in those first few years, there were hardly any people who could speak both languages, right? English and Russian. So they brought letters in what were international languages in those days: Greek, Latin, and Polish, because it was Slavic. И государь их пожаловал, почтил великим жалованием. So he gave him a lot of things. We'll see what he gave them. And then the next, well, several months later, there's another entry in the Chronicle which tells about the goodbye to the English messengers. Того же месяца отпустил государь Филиппа, короля Аглинского, посланников, рыцаря до Юрия, а с ним послал своего посланника Непею Вологжанина с грамотой. This is the name of the first Russian ambassador to England, Непея from Vologda. Описал к королю о любви и о ссылке. О какой ссылке он ему писал? Oh, about correspondence. Correspondence is ссылка. И людям его царь великий князь пожаловал в своих государствах, велел учинить пристанище корабленное на Двине. So he gave them the permission to build a port in the mouth of Dvina, where now Arkhangelsk is, right? So Arkhangelsk grew out of Russian English trade. И торг по всему государству повольный дал. So he exempted them from taxes. Can you imagine? This is a great benefit that he granted them. They could trade here without paying taxes. So he tried to stimulate this trade and, generally good relationships between Russia and England. Также и на Москве двором устроил. So they gave them an embassy, a place for the embassy, which is now in Zaryadye Park. It is called the Old English Court. It's just, this is the Kremlin, the St. Basil's Cathedral. This is the new park, you know, and this is the Old English Court.
Next to the club, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Old English Court. This is what it looks like. No, this is an English court, and it used to be the English embassy to Russia for quite some time. Then it was taken away from the English a century later, I think. And there was a monastery there. And then this building was rebuilt, and finally it was ruined. But then at the end of the 20th century, the archaeologists found the foundation, right? And they rebuilt this building on the foundation of the old building. So this is a recreation, but it looks very authentic. It does look like what it probably used to look like. And you can also appreciate his benevolence, his good attitude to the English by the place he chose, very close to the Kremlin, very close. But unfortunately, when Richard and Nepeia, and Richard was also had his son with him, when they were traveling back to England, just before they reached the coast of England, there was a storm, and the ships capsized, overturned, and Richard and his son got drowned. But Nepeia survived, and he came to the English king. Here he is. So he comes to the English king, and here are the lions showing the Russian. This is Nepeia. He's coming. This is the drowning of Richard, and Nepeia survives and comes to the English king. Now, but even without Richard, Chancellor, this enterprise, this Muscovy company, became very successful, quickly became rich. For the English, the conditions were much better than for the Russians. Why? Because Russians were also given a tax-free right to trade tax-free in England. But Russians didn't have a fleet, so they couldn't go to England to trade. So the English were basically the only benefactors of this deal. So they got very rich, and they actually built quite a good system of trade here in Russia. And the Muscovy Company became one of the leading company, one of the rich companies in England. In the city of London, there is still Muscovy Street, where there used to be the headquarters of the Muscovy Company. There are also several other place names in London which are connected to Russia. This is the Onega Gate. This is where the ships from Onega landed in England. And Russia Dock Road. This is where the ships were in the docks and could be mended and fixed. Then the journeys of the English to Russia became well known in England, and they also wrote some poems in those days. They were fond of writing poetry, even about most prosaic things. But in this case, that was a poem about England's exploration routes, Albion's England. No, this is for poetic reasons. Albion's England, of course. And here it says, a vast and spacious empire is Muscovy, in the same be rivers, Tanis, Volga, and Borysthenes of fame, so the names of the rivers, with yearly hallowed Moscow, which the primate having blessed. So Moscow with a lot of history. Euxinus and the Caspian seas do wash those frozen shores. Каспийское и Черное море омывают эти замороженные берега. Which us with fish, oils, honey, salt, furs, and good traffic's stores. So they bring to England all these good things. Okay. And this is also one more song about the exploration of Russia. Our Chancellor, and with him compare with Jenkinson, for Russia both embarked, the first arriving there, entering Dwina's mouth, and up her proud stream did steer to Volga, to behold her pomp, the Russian state Moscovia measuring then. And Jenkinson is the next head of the Muscovy Company. Well, I'll show you his name so you'll be able to put it down. And Jenkinson also compiled this beautiful map of Moscovia, of Russia. It's quite interesting to explore it. Maybe we're going to explore it during our seminar, but here you can just see different, just a brief look, brief glance. This is Kolmogorod, where it all happens. Dvina, Mishora, Kargopoli, Novogardia, the place of Novgorod. Kashirin, Vologda, Yaroslav. What else can we see? Kostroma, Ples, Volga, Cheremisi, Permia, Mishora, Obdora, Pustozera, Kaninos. So all these different places that you probably know from your geography of Russia. Yeah. Right. And also the south of Russia, because the English were interested not only in the Russian north, they were also equally and probably, equally interested in the route to Persia through Volga and the Caspian. So they wanted to trade with Persia as well. So you have Horda, Cherkasy, Crimea, Petigorsky Meridius, Desna, Smolensko, Vyazma, Moskva, Mozhaysko, Kasimgorod, Nizhno Novgorod, Morum. For some reason there is no Vladimir, it should be here. Mordva, Cherkasy, Don, Astrakhan. So all these places are there already. So Jenkinson, the second sorry, who knows where my, oh no, all right. Jenkinson traveled to the Caspian Sea. And so he went to the mouth of the Volga, and from thence also by ship over the Caspian Sea into the Media, and then with the camels into Georgia, Armenia, Hyrcania, and the chiefest cities of the Empire of Persia. Right. The next chapter, bright chapter in the relationships between Russia and England, followed when Ivan Grozny, Ivan the Terrible, was trying to court Elizabeth I. Why? Well, look, the Russians didn't get much in terms of economy from the English. Well, let's be honest, Russians didn't have a fleet. They didn't go to England. The only thing they got, of course, they benefited from the English trade, but the Russian tradesmen, merchants didn't benefit much. What could Russia ask in return? Politics, right? Support. And Ivan Grozny was at war with Livonia, with the Livonian Knights in those days. So he wanted England to sort of participate in a political sense. He wanted a political alliance. And at first he asked from Elizabeth some political influence. But Elizabeth, when there was this war between Russia and Livonia, Elizabeth said we're neutral. So she prohibited the export of any military things and military professionals to Russia. But she did not prohibit the same for Poland and Lithuania and for Sweden. So Ivan the Terrible was disappointed. But before he actually realized that he also wanted to form a political alliance and he wanted to marry Elizabeth. We know this only from hints that are which are there here and there in their correspondence. So he wrote to him through a trusted man, probably through Horsey or even from Jenkinson, that he wanted to propose to her, that to form, and just think what a mighty empire that could become. Yeah, huge empire. But she turned him down. She was not sure. And, that she preserved this title of the Virgin Queen until her death, though we'd never know. She probably had a husband, but officially she did not. And the state in the United States, Virginia, is called in honor of Elizabeth. And so she just declined under various pretexts. And Grozny was disappointed. In 1570, he wrote her a letter, a very angry letter, in which he recounted the different offenses, the different points of disappointment that he had faced from her. А всем аглинским людям жалованную свою грамоту дали такову свободную, какова и нашим людям торговым не живет свободно. So we gave the English such tax-free preferences that we do not give to our people. I think this is so typical of Russia, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be so welcoming to foreigners, even at the expense of our people. Отчаяли есмя то, что от брата вашего и от вас великие дружбы, и от всех аглинских людей службы. And we expected that from you we would expect great friendship and maybe some services. А в те поры ваши аглинские гости почали многие лукавства делать над нашими гостьми, и товары свои почали дорого продавать что чего не стоит. So your English merchant started to organize different schemes, right? Fraudery schemes over our merchants, and they started to sell their gifts or to sell their commodities at the price, at very expensive prices, what they don't cost, right? Overpricing. А после того прислали к нам своего посланника Антона Янкина, Антони Дженкинсон, о торговых делах. И мы, чающие того, что он у тебя в жаловании, его и меня привели к правде, да и другого твоего торгового человека, Рафа Иванова, для толмачества. What is толмачество? Interpretation. So there was a new interpreter for translation. Потому что было в таком великом деле толмачить некому. There was nobody to translate things. И приказывали, Есмя, с ним к тебе словом свои великие дела тайны. So this is one of the hints that he was trying to send this message of marriage. Yeah. And this bit, I inserted this bit when we had the pandemic here in Russia. А после того прошло Божье послание, поветрие, и ему было у нас невозможно. There was an epidemic, and we couldn't communicate, so there was a pause in communication. А как время пришло, и Божье послание минулось по ветре, и мы ему велели свои очи видите, и он нам говорил о торговых же делах. So after the pandemic, after the epidemic, we met, and he kept speaking about trading things. And then about another merchant. И мы велели у него обыскать и грамот. И у него многие грамоты выняли. И в тех грамотах про наше государское имя и про наше государство соукоризною писано. И многие вести неподобные писаны. Как будто в нашем царстве неподобные дела деются. Fake news. 16th century. So the merchant was carrying some papers, carrying some documents in which there were bad words written about Ivan Grozny and bad things about how things are in Russia. Yeah. And, well, merchants were spies in those days as well. И мы чаяли того, что ты на своем государстве государыня и сам овладеющий своей государской чести смотришь своему государству прибытка. So we expected you to be a sovereign, that you are looking for the benefits of your country. И мы потому такие дела и хотели с тобой делать. Аж у тебя мимо тебя люди владеют. И не только мы люди, но мужики торговые. И о наших государственных головах, и о честях прибытка не смотрят, а ищут своих торговых прибытков. And who is doing politics instead of you? These are merchants, common people who are thinking about their own pocket, about their own income, not about your, country. А ты пребываешь в своем девическом чину, как есть пошлая девица, which means doesn't mean that he was trying to say that she was.
You can just delete all the text and just
Right. This is the most important, the most famous line. But he didn't mean that being a maiden is inferior thing. He wasn't saying this is poshla. He just said that you are a simple maiden. You are not a real monarch, because the tradespeople are ruling instead of you, and you are not even married, so you are, well, you're not. It's not morally bad, but it's sort of for the country. That's not really, beneficial. И коли уж так, и мы эти дела отставим на сторону, а мужики торговые, которые отставили наши государственные головы и нашу государственную честь, и нашим землям прибыток, осмотрят своих торговых дел, и они посмотрят, как начнут торговать. So he abolished all those preferences, all those benefits for the English merchants. А московское государство пока место без аглинских товаров не скудно было. So we can do without the English. Yeah, but we can do without the English goods. And they will see, right? They will see how they're going to trade. So all the charters that we granted them, they are abolished. So after that, there was this cooling of relationships between Russia and England. And though a bit later, Ivan Grozny, I try to pronounce his name in the Russian way, because terrible is not really a good translation for Grozny. Terrible is not Grozny. So after some time, he sent another letter asking for another English wife, and there were negotiations about Mary Hastings, who was Elizabeth's lady in waiting. So here you can see Russian ambassadors in big hats, furry hats, and with beards, looking at Mary Hastings. But that didn't come to anything. The Tsar died in 1586, and it was all finished. Now, just a very brief comparison between Ivan the Terrible and Henry VIII, Why? They lived around the same time, and we get a stereotypical view that they were, in a way, similar. Both of them had many wives. Ivan had 7. King Henry VIII had 6. No, he didn't. He didn't. He didn't want them to die. Actually, he married so many times because they kept dying. Yeah, and Henry VIII changed religion, yeah, to marry another lady that he wanted. But of course, Henry was he was a generation older than Ivan. He was the generation of his parents. But let us see how much. And we also have one more stereotype, that both of them were very cruel, and that Ivan the Terrible is called the Terrible because of this. But what we read in Wikipedia is that Henry actually did prosecute quite a lot of people. 2 of his wives, 20 peers, so 20 lords, 4 leading statesmen, 6 close allies and friends, 1 cardinal, and a lot of abbots. Well, it is estimated that anywhere from 57,000 to 72,000 people were executed during Henry's 37 years reign. But this is likely to be an exaggeration. But even if we take the lowest number, it is, well, maybe 30,000 people, 50,000 people. And if we look at Ivan the Terrible statistics, it's around between 4 and 5 and 20,000 people. So he wasn't as terrible as Henry the Terrible was.
So in 1 year, he killed about 1,500 people, if we're talking about Henry.
Yeah. So he was much sort of deadlier for his subjects than Ivan was. And at the same time, this is the stereotype that we have, right? I mean, the English have. Ivan the Terrible was terrible, and Henry VIII was just Henry VIII. So if you happen to speak to the English about the 2 kings, you can remember the statistics. Now, if we come back to the to the Muscovy Company, the next heads of the Muscovy Company were Anthony Jenkinson, Jerome Horsey, who wrote Observations in 17 Years Travels and Experience in Russia. Very interesting book. Though, of course, it's not that easy to read it because it's written in early modern English. And then the third one, and probably the most famous one, was Giles Fletcher. He spent in Russia only a year, or literally half a year. Those were the days when the relationships between Russia and England cooled to the lowest degree. Those were the first years of the rule of Feodor, Tsar Feodor, the son of Ivan Grozniy. And several spies were intercepted. So merchants who were spies. And of course, Feodor was not happy about this. And when Giles Fletcher came here to try to settle things, he spent very few months in Moscow, but then he was exiled to Vologda and spent some time in, well, not in prison, but sort of in confinement. He was not allowed to travel anywhere. So when he came to England, he was so angry that he wrote a book of the Rus Commonwealth, which laid a foundation stone in the whole building of English bad-mouthing of Russia. That is a book which tells about Russia all sorts of nasty things, how bad the Tsar is, how badly people live here. And of course, you can imagine that, and it was so bad that Elizabeth banned the publication of this book in England, because that...
others allowed to
read. No, I mean, he lived in England. But she banned the publication of this book because it damaged the image of the Muscovy Company, damaged business. And but many people later on took this at face value and relied on this as on a piece of historical evidence, which is, of course, very difficult to see. Of course, there are things there that we can maybe get as pieces of evidence about Russia in those days. But of course, a large portion of that It's just something he got, all sorts of,
Emotion.
stories that he got from people. He never traveled around Russia. He spent most of his time in Russia, in Vologda, in prison. So all he got from in his book, all of those are stories that he got from people. Some of them might be true, some of them not, but all of that is a collection of bad stories about Russia. Giles Fletcher.
1553, the English enjoyed us, and after 30 years.
Yeah. But later on there were periods of warming, periods of friendship. We'll speak about them. But from time to time, yeah, there were things like that. Now, this is a picture about Ivan Grozny showing Horsey his treasures. Just wanted to show you the illustration of what people looked like in those days. Yeah. We want to show you his treasure. And finally, that is the time when English professionals start coming to Russia. The Russian nobility treasured, valued English doctors, and among them were Robert Jacob, Mark Credley, Arthur D, and Elysius Bomelius. Elysius Bomelius is hardly a doctor. He was an astrologer, and he was a quack doctor who was imprisoned in England for all sorts of things. But he was an entrepreneur. He was an adventurer. So he proposed to the English statespeople, to the English police, who was there in those days, to send him to Russia because he got an invitation from Russia as a doctor. But he promised to send back different espionage materials, different intelligence to the English government. And he went to Russia. He spent 4 or even 9 years at the court of Ivan the Terrible, who valued him as an astrologer, as a magician, and as a doctor. But then and he got a lot of money for his services. He sent them back to England. But unfortunately, his fate was not really enviable. In the end, he was, Ivan suspected that he was spying in favor of Poland, and he was tortured, and finally he was roasted alive. Apparently, that's what some people tell us. So he died a bad death. And then under Feodor, we're going to finish in a second, under Feodor, this spy story began. So Роберт Пик, как товарищ с прибытия своего в наше государство, непригоже вел себя в наших делах. Тайно посылал из нашей земли некоторых людей, сущих негодяев, со своими письмами через литовскую землю, без нашего государева ведома или дозволения, и без пропускной грамоты, как бы лазутчиками. А в письмах своих писал он в иные земли, и в свою землю в Англии, многие непригожие дела о нашем государе. Yeah. So this is where we finished the first lecture, and thank you very much for your attention.